Alright, good evening everyone. My name's gwEm and welcome to my stream. Shout outs to 48k who says Lindrum is the greatest drum machine ever made. We can talk about that. So I have picked the Roland TR-707 to deal with tonight. So I've been through all the other Roland drum machines. We did the 808, the 505, the 606 and the 909. It's the best till last, basically. My personal favorite drum machine. And I think the greatest drum machine of all time, although that is disputed, and I was just called an edgelord on Twitter. Let me tell you a little story before we get into some sounds, which, you know, obviously we all want to do. The first drum machine I got was a Roland TR-606, but I traded it then for a TR-707, which I much preferred because it's got these sliders which make jamming with it so easy and straightforward. It's got much larger memory than the 606, it's got swing, it's got a bunch of separate outputs, it's got a MIDI output, it's got a DIN sync input and output. You can plug in a cartridge to get more storage space. Got this really big display here, which tells you exactly where you are in your pattern. And you can chain patterns together really easily. You can switch between them live. Basically, it's amazing. It's the stuff dreams are made of. I am being a little bit tongue-in-cheek because I don't think many people would pick this as their greatest drum machine of all time. And I think the reason why people wouldn't pick it as their favorite is that the sounds aren't the most classic drum machine sounds out there, although they are quite classic. They're very recognizable. They were using a bunch of acid house and a bunch of pop tunes. And the TR-707 is finding popularity again at the moment because synthwave producers are really digging the sounds. And when you put a load of reverb on, it does sound very, very synthwave. This thing is super easy to use as well. I don't know if it's because I just had one since 18 or I might have been 19, I think. I'm just super familiar with it. Or if it really is just super easy to use, probably a bit of both. This one has a kit in which expands the sound, so you've got a number of drum kits, but I'm just going to use the default drum kit. So let's get into the sounds. And they are 8-bit sounds, which some people think they're 12-bit, but they are actually 8-bit sounds. And they play back at different sample rates as well. Some of them are a bit higher for better quality on the high frequency sounds. It has 2 kick drum sounds. This is a sort of more attacking kick drum. And the second one sounds almost the same, bit less attack. When I first got a 707, I thought, well, that's weird because why would they put 2 kick drums that sound nearly the same in, but they are subtly different. There's 2 types of snare drum as well. Kind of a higher pitched one and more of a crunchy one. Again, they sound very similar. I always use the first one. Then we have 3 toms, low, medium and high. And they sound absolutely perfect. I don't use a lot of toms in my track, but if I was doing some synthwave, I'd be caning those toms. I'd be absolutely caning them. It's got a nice rim shot. It's very Roland-esque. Sounds like a lot of Roland rim shots. We've got a cowbell, which is a kind of a realistic cowbell rather than like a synthetic cowbell like the 808. It's a shame. I don't really like it, but it does fit to certain tracks. If you're making like an old hip-hop track, like a Run DMC style beat, that's really good. Got a tambourine, which is a nice alternative to using a hi-hat. Gives a little bit of a different flavor. Then we've got open and close hi-hat. And they actually use the same sample. There's an envelope applied to the open hi-hat to make it the closed hi-hat. But if you listen, you couldn't really tell. They've done such a good job of making that sound natural. We've got a crash cymbal. That's the longest sound on the unit, and it has its very own ROM chip to store just the crash cymbal. And the second longest is the ride. And again, it has its own, it's got its own chip just for the ride. If you listen to the crash and the ride cymbal, compare them to the 909 and also that open hi-hat, they are very similar. They're not quite the same. Some people think that the cymbals are the same as on the 909, but then I can assure you they're not. But they do sound the same, and I wonder if they might have sampled the same cymbals again for the 707. That's what I wonder. But I don't know for sure. Matt writes, there's a Roland promo video when the Arias came out where they show you the original hi-hat that was sampled on the 909, and it's mind-blowing to see an actual hi-hat being struck and the iconic sound it plays. Yes, I agree. And they might not sound much, but believe me, I've used these drum sounds in more tracks than any other drum machine. They're all over my back catalogue. I use them all the time on the Atari. Something about those sounds just cuts through the mix super well. Well, let me put it this way. If I've got a track where the drums aren't quite working, and I change the drums for a 707 drums, it always works. And it's kind of got to the point where I try not to use the 707 because I don't want the same drums in every track, but it's kind of my get out of jail free card. And let's make a beat. Let's make a house beat. The TR-707 has an awesome swing. To make a beat, I'm switching into step right mode. You do that by pressing shift and the pattern button, and that will take you into step right mode. Then I'm going to select unused pattern, which is this one I checked earlier. If you press clear and then hold down the pattern button, it will erase that pattern. And now we can start making our beat. I'm going to do a 4 to the floor. I'm going to press the instrument button and then the bass drum button so I can start entering kick drums. Some people think that the kick drum sounds like a basketball being bounced off a concrete wall. That's pretty unflattering, but it does sound like a basketball being bounced off a concrete wall. You can kind of rev that kick drum up a bit. If you scoop out some of the mids and boost the bass and the treble a little bit, starts to sound a lot better. If I had a spare compressor here, which I don't, I'd put this through a very aggressive compressor, but what you can do is just distort this kick a bit. And that sounds already quite a lot tougher. It sounds now like a slightly heavier basketball being bounced off a concrete wall. This is the sound dreams are made of. Let's add a clap. Bit of reverb on the clap. I'm going to do some hi-hats now. And now open hi-hat. So that's already sounding wicked. Next thing I'm going to do is put an accent which will make it pump a bit more. And it sounds pretty good like that, but when you start adding the accent, it always livens up any drum machine. The 707 actually has not one, but 2 levels of accent, and it's a global accent as well. But I find that default first accent level is fine. If you use that and you max the accent slider here, that's the sound that I use. So let's put some swing on the track now. This is one of the great features of the 707. Might be a bit too much now, but you can hear how slippery and slidey it gets, how housey it is. You probably noticed that I'm a bit more animated and excited this week than I usually am, and it's just because I love this drum machine so much and it's just so comfortable. It feels good to be showing it off to you guys. Going to add a ride cymbal now. So that's sounding pretty good. This is a trick that you can also do on the 909 if you want to. If you can use that snare as a build. And just mute it with the slider so you can do a build whenever you want. Let me demonstrate how that might work. And so on. Now, with these sliders, if you're used to DJing and kind of knocking crossfaders and stuff, it's second nature. I'm going to add a crash cymbal now, just on the first step. And so on. It just works really well, and you can see you can already jam just with this. And I think it's a bit easier than using the 808 or the 606 or the 909, because those drum machines will have rotary knobs for doing the volumes, and these are sliders, so you can literally flick them. I'm going to copy that pattern into the next 4 and make a slightly longer drum beat so it's not quite so repetitive. So what you do is you go onto the destination pattern, you do shift copy, then you pick the source pattern, then you press enter. This 707 has 2 mods. So there's a mod which I came up with to change the volume balance of the sounds, which I think is quite important. And it also has a Harry Axton ROM upgrade. So it's got sounds from the 707, obviously, the 727, the Lindrum, the LM1, the DMX, the 808 and the 909. I've got a review of it on my YouTube channel as well. Let's see how they all sound together. If you press the start pattern and the end pattern and then press enter, it will chain those. We've got that snare build going through the whole thing, but I like to remove it on the first 2 bars of a 4-bar loop. I think we've pretty much got our drum beat. I mean, I could go in there and put some toms on there, but I don't really feel like it. Let's get the 303 in effect. Yes, yes. So this is a classic acid house combination, the TR-707 with the TB-303. Now this is kind of where some of the cool sync options of the TR-707 kind of come into effect, because this thing has MIDI input and output, it has DIN sync input and output, and it has tape sync input and output. And back in the day, people used to use the TR-707 to sync all their gear together, and it works really well in that role. Matt Nida says, tape sync input has an unbelievable function. I programmed the sync pattern on Piggy Tracker and was able to sync the 707 to my Sony PSP using only an RCA audio cable. That's a top tip from Matt there. Keep that in mind. Let's make a groovy little acid pattern. You'll notice that although the 707 it has a swing on it, the swing isn't transferred to the 303. Now, I've never really had a problem with that, but it does bother some people. The way around that is to use an external sync box to generate your sync pulses and make sure that they're swung. Many times I've gone through how to program a 303 on this channel, but this time I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm actually going to do, rather than have a note on every step, I'm going to mess with the time feature just to do something a bit different. So what I'm just going to do, just to see what will happen, I'm going to do a mixture of short and long notes and rests just to see what will happen. Yeah! Let's program another acid pattern though. And again, I'm just going to put random notes and rests in. And that sounds really good as well, and I've literally just randomly pissed around. Let's add some accents and slides. That's good. Let's do the same on the second pattern. So we got a nice beat on the 707, some lucky TB-303 acid lines. So what we need now is another TB-303. Now I don't have one, although I would like to have two TB-303s, but I have got this. So this is the Ladyada Zox box. This Zox box I built myself when it first came out. It was developed by a woman engineer from New York called Ladyada, and she did a fantastic job. And for ages, this was one of the best TB-303 emulations you can get. Now, of course, there are other ones like the RE303, which is meant to be even more accurate. But I did a back-to-back test the other day of the Zox box with the 303, and I found it very hard to tell the difference, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm going to use this to create the bass part of my track. Now, the way you program the Zox box is a bit different from the 303. It's a bit like, I don't know if anyone here remembers the program Rebirth by the company Propellerhead, which was a sort of early soft synth based on the 303. But it's a lot like that. Just going to do an offbeat bass. So that's the chain we want to use. There you go. There's some authentic old school acid house. 707 and two 303s. Do I have a compressor on the master? Yeah, I've got the Alesis Nanocompressor on the master just to give a bit of pump. Thanks everyone for joining, and shout out to everyone. It's been really good having you guys on the stream. Honestly, this was a really good stream, probably because I love this box so much.